David Bayer. Thank you for joining us on the Jesus Way podcast today, brother. It's a pleasure to have you.
Awesome to be here. Thanks, guys.
So you grew up religious, right?
I did not grow up religious at all.
You did not. James, you betrayed me.
It's okay. My mom was, well, I guess it depends on your definition. So my mom was Lutheran. My dad is Jewish. And we celebrated Christmas, Hanukkah, Easter, Passover, but never had exposure to religion. So I wouldn't say I grew up in a family where like God was much of a thing.
Yeah.
Or
dogma.
Right. Other than, you know, we would say a prayer at night and God was sort of included in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So then I'd love to hear more about your non-religious journey and how you've sort of taken the teachings of Jesus and understood them from your own more unconditioned lens, because a lot of the things we talk about on this podcast have to do with sort of the psychology of deconstruction. You know, I had to go through that big time as a third generation PK and stuff, but I almost want to say the pathology of deconstruction sometimes, but it is a very intensive psychological journey to unravel from decades, lifelong belief systems that you've held and been reinforced by parents and pastors and all that. So you didn't have to go through that, thankfully for you, but what is your view of religion then, I guess? And how have you interacted with religion in a way that you feel is non-detrimental, maybe?
Well, yeah, I think my story would give some context. You know, when I got into college, I started getting more exposed to religion. I don't know why it was really absent in my early schooling. You know, in fifth grade, I moved to a dedicated school it was like a gifted and talented education program. Like they herded up all the nerds and they put them in a very safe place where they could be nerdy together.
Yeah. Nice padded room.
Yeah. And like reflecting upon that, well, I never had any type of religious conversation with any of my besties. You know, there were like 12 of us. Some of them probably had religious families. Some of them probably went to church every week or temple or mosque or whatever they did, right? But it was just not part of our conversation. And then I started getting exposure to it in college. And some of that was just through course load too, right? There was religious studies, there was philosophical studies. And I would say I considered myself to be agnostic. Maybe at some point I self-labeled atheistic. I probably didn't even really know what that meant. But I know at one point in time I was like, I just don't know. Yeah. And it really wasn't until I started my recovery work, like realizing I was a drug addict, an alcoholic, a sex addict, that was in my early 30s, that I started getting exposure to spirituality through my 12-step program.
Okay, you went through the 12 steps.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah, so that was, you know, as I started taking responsibility for my behaviors and my thoughts and my resentments, I mean, the 12-step structure is an incredible framework.
It is.
For healing. And built into it are, you know, 3 steps really dedicated to your relationship with your higher power.
Yeah.
And that was foreign to me. I remember having a conversation with some of the other guys who were in my recovery group, and they're trying to explain like, well, your higher power can be anything that can do what, you know, you're not capable of doing. And even that concept didn't make sense to me. But I think as I started clearing out some of the cobwebs, I became available for a relationship. And that is where I started a relationship with the higher power of my own understanding. And sort of simultaneous to that, I was getting into personal growth and psychology and then metaphysics and then eventually into New Age. So there was this idea of the universe. And so that to me was very separate than what I was seeing with religion. Religion was always very clearly to me divisive, just in its nature of having different religions. And that always felt like an incongruence to me. Because of the nature of division, right?
Yeah.
It's you know, it's not wholeness. It creates conflict.
Suffering.
Suffering. So I always felt like something was off about the religious model. And as I continued to progress in my relationship with the higher power of my own understanding, which at that time I had defined as the universe, about a couple of years ago, actually, I started really craving a personal relationship with the God of my own understanding. And it wasn't that I was hesitant to refer to my higher power as God. I just wasn't quite sure how to distinguish God from universe, from all that is, to a lot of the descriptions that you can see across different spiritual cultures. the one, the divine mind, all of these pieces.
Monad,
yeah. And so but I felt inspired to have a personal relationship with God. And it was really modeled after what I saw of David in the Bible. Like, I wanted to have a real relationship that allowed me to stand up to the challenges or the Goliaths of my life with a faith that there was someone or something that stood behind me that cared for me, that cared for me personally. And, metaphysics and scripture tells us, right? Ask and ye shall receive. And so I started getting answers and clarity and started building a relationship with God. And then Jesus started to find his way in.
Yeah.
And while I still feel like I'm in this continued development of this personal relationship with God, the relationship with Jesus is newer for me, but it feels important.
Yeah.
In fact, I did an episode on my show probably a year and a half ago, which had a very clickbaity caption, which was "the Jesus question finally answered." And I don't know what the Jesus question is or what the answer is.
Did he exist?
But it was just more like, okay, what for those of us who, I think a lot of what I was hearing from my Christian friends was this idea that it sounds like this: Jesus is your Lord and Savior, and in order to get to some place called salvation or receive something called salvation, you have to accept this, and you have to accept that Jesus is the Son of God.
Yeah.
And something never really felt complete with me around that.
Yeah.
And so I think there was some distance between me and Jesus as a result of it. And some of the Christians that I met were very aggressive in their opinion around this.
Yeah.
That felt very un-Jesus-like.
Yeah.
And so that was very confusing to me. And so I've been open to a relationship with Jesus. We can talk a little bit more about where I think I'm at in that relationship.
Yeah.
But that's been my experience of my own spiritual journey, where religion has shown up, the universe to God and the personal relationship, and sort of moving into what I kind of am viewing right now as like Jesus the brother. So I don't.
There we go.
Yeah.
The true prophet.
Yeah.
If you love the teachings and practices that I give here on my channel, and you want help integrating these teachings in the deepest way possible, then I've got good news for you. I've decided to take all my courses and programs that I've been selling at a premium for years and put them all inside of one monthly membership for just $44 a month. When you join 40U now, you get access to all 5 of my graduate level programs on topics like brainwave-based meditation, Kundalini awakening, menu work, and self-mastery. Over 12 months of curriculum, all under one low monthly membership that leaves the ball firmly in your court. And I made this change for one simple reason, because I've watched this curriculum change thousands of lives over the last 5 years, and I want that impact to reach as many people as possible. So I decided to make all my programs available in one low-cost membership. $44 a month gives you access to our full course library, all my past masterclasses, live weekly calls, and a thriving community of thousands of students doing this work every day. You get access to our menu work app and every new course I release in real time. Our 40U student membership is now your one-stop shop for all my courses and material. You can register or learn more at the link in the description below this video, or you can scan the QR code on the screen. And I look forward to working with you very soon. Yeah, that's great, man. I love your reflections as a non-religious person coming into relationship with Jesus, because you're able to see certain things that people coming from religion can't see. And one of them, the primary one, is the fact that Jesus often gets blamed for Paul's problems. It's Paul that said, there's no forgiveness of sins without a blood sacrifice. If you confess with your mouth, believe in your heart, Jesus was raised from the dead, you'll be saved. And we continually point out on this podcast, and really it was like one of the foundational tenets of why we started this podcast, is please show me where Jesus said any of that. Because I'm a follower of Jesus, I'm not trying to follow somebody else. If somebody else teaches things that are in alignment with Jesus, great. But I'm a follower of Jesus, not Paul or anybody else. And so if Paul says things that Jesus doesn't say, it's an easy choice. I'm siding with Jesus. And so if you can't show me where Jesus taught this penal substitution thing, then I'm not going to buy it, right? And even if you could, I wouldn't buy it, but that's what I don't tell them. But I've watched enough of your content, man, to know that you're a total metaphysics geek like we are. So I'd love to double tap into what you're describing here of your relationship with Jesus, and maybe like a larger question too of why so many people have an experience like you're describing where they're totally non-religious, maybe they were an atheist or whatever, and at some point Jesus just comes into their spiritual walk, and it's like super authentic, it's always very genuine, and you can see that people are lit up, right? It's a very real kind of thing that's happening. And the kind of internet space has been flooded with this awakening recently back to Orthodox Christianity, but largely because people are feeling this call to Jesus. And so I've done a lot of thinking about this, as maybe you have, of what is it about? Why didn't Buddha have the same effect on planet Earth? And he sort of did, but not to the magnitude of Jesus. Why not Krishna? Why not Lao Tzu? Why not whoever? It's this unique thing with Jesus. And I think that if we're talking metaphysics, there's this difference between Jesus and Christ. Jesus was the man, Christ is the consciousness. Jesus is the person, but Christ is we sort of call it the divine idea of man. That Jesus or the Christ rather, represents what God's ideal flourishing and living and thriving of mankind should look like. We should all be like Jesus, right? A planet full of Christs. And so he becomes the bullseye target for everybody, spiritually speaking, because he is our kind of teleological destiny, right? We're all evolving towards that Christ nature, the full embodiment of it. And so I think that Jesus appears to people a lot in near-death experiences and in and outside of religion because he's like part of all of us, or Christ is part of all of us in terms of our evolutionary destiny. And that might have something to do with why you were also awakened, I think, to being more attracted to Jesus / Christ in your own journey, because at a certain point of development, I think that archetype needs to start presenting itself to you. So you can, like by interacting with Jesus in your mind, even reading the Gospels or whatever, you're starting to understand what God's divine idea for you is, to live like Jesus, to walk like Jesus, to talk like Jesus, and so forth. So what are your thoughts on all of that?
I'm going to share, I'm sure today, things that I think I know of the Bible, and some people will think they're wrong.
Of course.
And they may just be objectively wrong. Like, I'm not a great student of the Bible yet. And I think that I agree with a lot of what you just shared. On a practical level, Jesus is a model.
Yeah.
And, I do really, it excites me, this idea that Jesus would come as the Christ and say, hey, you will do even greater things than I will. It speaks to the potential of humanity. It speaks to the possibility of our species. I think on one level, Jesus as Christ could be viewed as a neurology or a nervous system. It's building the capacity in the nervous system to be in a clear relationship with however someone would want to define the Father or the divine or all that is, or each other. So it's a nervous system that doesn't have resistance. And so it's living in the oneness. It's a frequency as well, right? So it's a model, it's a nervous system. And I should also say within the nervous system, we can make it a little bit too cold because it's not just a nervous system, it's a heart capacity as well, right? Yeah. It's those two pieces. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times, especially in today's conversations around peak performance or flow states or downregulation of the nervous system, the heart sort of gets left out. I think that the heart is really important as an access point to the non-physical or the non-sensed. Like, it seems to me that the brain does a really good job of working with kind of what is in iterative ways, but the heart has the capacity to bring in newness, whether that's new information or a new relationship. So, and I think there's an importance in, it sounds funny when I hear myself saying this, but like there's Christ is important, because through whatever Jesus did to become available to the relationship he had with God and to the teachings and the information, that granted the capacity to do the demonstrations and the miracles, and to be who he has been for so many people. It brought a new possibility that seemed to have not existed before. And I'll give you an example. It's sort of a Roger Bannister moment in terms of a relationship with God. I think of it as, and you'll get all kinds of comments on this YouTube episode because people will say, well, Edison didn't invent the light bulb, and they'll say it was Tesla and a bunch of other stuff. Trust me, I know. But let's just say Edison brought the light bulb into the world, Thomas Edison. And so now we all have light bulbs in our homes, right? And so Christ brought the Christ consciousness, and now so we all have access to that inside of us. It's like bringing a new innovation that becomes available to everyone. So, on all those levels and more, I think that is what the phenomenon of Christ has provided.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I often will say to my Christian friends exactly your point, that as inspiring and worshipful as the person of Christ appears to be in the Gospels, right? Despite all of that, Jesus was what he was because he knew I and the Father are one, and not because he confessed Jesus as his personal Lord and Savior, right?
Sure.
I want to be inspired by what Jesus was inspired by. And he didn't become what he was by some whimsical theological assent in his mind. He embodied the source codes, the archetype of God, and he expressed it through his being. And then he said, greater works will you do. Come follow me. Keep my commandments. If you love me, keep my commandments.
Well, and he spoke specifically that the whimsical assent was not the way.
Right.
I mean, that was very...
Not everyone who calls me Lord, Lord will enter my kingdom. Yeah, so he's looking for, this is the Jesus way to us.
Yeah.
Repent, turn your heart to God. Love God with all your heart, love your neighbor as yourself, be of service to others. Every gospel teaching of Jesus fits into those categories. And again, you don't find anything about certain ideas or theologies you have to believe in for God to accept you. And even to the point of, we often laugh about, even after Jesus rises from the dead in Matthew and Luke, in both accounts, he says, I think in Matthew he says, go and teach them to observe all that I've commanded you in all the nations, and I'll be with you to the ends of the age. And he floats up to heaven. And then in Luke's account, he rises from the dead and he says, go and preach repentance for the forgiveness of sins to all nations. And he floats up to heaven. And you're just like, come on, Jesus, give us the juice, man. You just rose from the dead. Now's the time where you get to tell us, all right, guys, what I just did, it's all about that. Believe that I died for your sins and rose again, and you'll be saved. And he floats up to heaven. You just can't imagine a scenario where that was his gospel message and he failed to communicate that to his closest disciples.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things. And I do want to close the loop on Krishna, Lao Tzu, Buddha.
If you're someone who loves reading and writing and you've wanted to maybe explore becoming an author yourself, whether full-time or part-time, our good friend Scott Shepper and Jesus Way podcast guest has written this amazing book called Penpreneur, which teaches you how to make 6 figures a year writing 1 piece a month. So this is something you could do as a side hobby, as a side career, or as a full-time career, depending on how serious you want to be with your authorship. But this book is a goldmine for writing tools and secrets and strategies that will really enhance your ability to communicate ideas in book form. I'm working on my second book as we speak, and Penpreneur has been an indispensable tool for me to just help me upgrade my writing game and how to put together a book in a way that really keeps the reader engaged and wanting to turn the next page. And so I can't recommend this book enough for people who are wanting to venture into the world of authorship.
Scott really walks the walk with this book. I mean, he used these exact strategies to go from essentially homeless to doing very well as an author.
Yeah.
He implemented this very strategy that he's going to teach you in this book. And it's 100% for free for the Jesus Way audience. What a great gift to our people.
Yeah, Scott's making this book available for basically for free, $4.95 just to cover the shipping. And you can get that by scanning the QR code on the screen right now, or you can go to JesusWayDiscount.com to get your copy of Penpreneur today and learn how to make 6 figures a year writing 1 piece a month.
You know, you do hear this idea that the Bible is the word of God, and that just completely denies the historical account of how the Bible was created.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So that's, but again, you know, I think the Jesus way is that, we're able to accept those people who want to believe what they want to believe and who are on their own journey, right? So, but it's very clear that this was not a, word for word, God-given document, right? Yeah. So, in fact, just the opposite, right? It was sort of a document created by committee with specific motivations and purposes behind it. When I think about where Christ fits in the sequence and some context for these other, let's maybe call them avatars. I look at, I have a consciousness storyline that I entertain, where you have Abraham who came and through his presence, again, his Roger Bannister moment was a new identity in God. Because previous to that, you had lots of gods, you had paganism, you had gods of sacrifice. And the story of Abraham, I think, is really beautiful in my interpretation of it. And again, I could be, educated to have a different interpretation, but the way that I see it up until now is, Abraham is asked to do what the other gods would ask people to do, in the form of sacrificing his son. And then God intervenes and essentially says, I'm not those gods. Yeah. Right. And so all of a sudden there was a personal relationship, a new identity with a loving God that did not require these things of you, that just wanted to have a relationship. And then the next evolution of sort of this consciousness story was Moses coming, because we can have a personal relationship with a loving God, but then the question is, well, how do I function within that relationship, right? And so Moses brings how we function. He brings the law of Moses and says, this is the structure of how we operate in this new identity and new relationship. I'm trying to think of all of the pieces here. The next piece would be Jesus coming and saying, well, it's fine if we have this, but is a human being capable of actually being this? And so Jesus says, yes, you can actually be this. I will show you. I am the law of Moses in my demonstrations. And we can see what the byproduct of that beingness is. And you can develop the relationship with the Father just as I have. You can develop the capacity to perform miracles. You can develop this nervous system and this heart. You can develop the ability to fear no evil, all the things. Yeah. Then you have Muhammad coming, and Muhammad says, but even an individual being that is not enough. We have to actually be that as a society. And so we have to incorporate these principles in everything that we do. It should run economics. It should run the sociological rules. It should the way that we run our family. Government. Yeah. And so, it's almost like, I think of what Muhammad was teaching was the possibility of like Jesus at scale. And I do see this relationship. I said this in an episode recently, pissed some people off, but it's like, I look at it as a trilogy. It's like Old Testament, New Testament, Quran. If you read the beginning of the Quran, the first 30 pages are, I think, the voice of whoever the narrator is, or the people.
Wasn't it Angel Gabriel? I want to say
it could have been the Angel Gabriel, but it was basically admonishing the God's chosen people for not listening all the way along. It's like, we sent you Abraham, we sent you Moses, we sent you Jesus. So now we'll send Muhammad to repeat the message again to see if we can get it right this time. And then you have Krishna, right? Which, technically Krishna, if Krishna ever appeared, was way before Christ, way before most of these people, of these avatars, but he brought duty, he brought purpose. I think purpose is probably loose around that, but it's like, okay, but all of this, yes, but then what is my role in this life? Like, what am I meant to do? We can all live according to these laws and principles in this new identity, and we can do it as a society together, but then we have how do we show up on a day-to-day basis when life shows up in ways that we don't expect? And then you got Buddha somewhere in this timeline, which is like, look, in order to actually do a lot of this, there's an essential component here, which is become aware of your inner world, self-awareness. So these guys like string together with all these different pieces, and Christ sort of sits in the middle as the embodiment of all of it. Yeah, masculine and feminine. And so I think, for me, if it's like, well, what's the difference between Christ and these other guys? It's like, well, it's that. It's having all of these pieces of the code of consciousness and then integrating it and saying, hey, this is really possible.
Oh, that's great. Wow. We talk about that often too, that Jesus was the full embodiment of the avatar. Not that the other beings before Christ weren't also avatars of their day and age, but we think Jesus is the best example of that because we, at least through the gospel records, we have an account of how he went through his torturous death ceremony at the hands of the priestly cult, the temple cult. And he says things like, "No one's taken my life from me. I'm laying it down freely. Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." He refuses to defend himself before Pilate and King Agrippa. It's this incredible account of a truly enlightened being facing the most agonizing possible fate. And all the way through it, you see this incredible faith in God and knowing who he is too. And so it's like, maybe the Buddha could have done that. I'm open to that. Maybe Krishna could have done that.
Buddha wasn't confronted like that. That wasn't Buddha's karma. That wasn't the purpose of Buddha's incarnation, right? Because what you're speaking to is, I don't want to overly emphasize the uniqueness of it, but is the forgiveness piece. It's interesting coming out of it's the forgiveness, it's turning the other cheek, coming out of recovery. We have 2 of our 12 steps dedicated to inventorying our resentments and letting go of them for forgiveness. It's why the program works to some extent. Yeah. And in our work that we do in helping people with their mindset, one of the inquiries we were in years ago was, why is it that some limiting beliefs are easier to transform and other limiting beliefs seem to stick around? Like, I'm sure there are limiting beliefs that you've shifted, and I'm sure there's some beliefs you have that you're aware of, but they're still sticking around a little bit longer than you would like, right? And one of the things that we found is that those limiting beliefs are bound through resentment. So you cannot let go of a limiting belief if you're still holding on to the person who represented or formed that belief with you. So my point is that Christ brought nuances that were not overtly visible in other teachings that are essential for the evolution of your consciousness.
Yes. And I would say forgiveness is the chief of all. I don't see any other avatar that we've named teaching forgiveness like Jesus did. Really, I almost want to say at all almost. Like, you really don't see forgiveness in Buddha or Krishna, maybe a little bit. But in Jesus, it's the whole message. Hey, if you don't forgive your brother his trespasses, your heavenly Father can't forgive yours. Because in this universe, you can't have what you withhold, right? And he goes to the cross, forgives his murderers while they're murdering him. And it's this incredible display of enlightenment, of what enlightenment looks like under the worst form of torture. And he embodied that teleological idea of man. This is what we can be. And so, again, maybe the Buddha could have done that. Maybe Krishna could have done that. Maybe Zoroaster.
Or you have teachings. You have teachings. We have a number of really well-educated practitioners of Islam in our programs. And it's been really beautiful because as I've started to get more into weaving scripture into what we teach, because it's an explanation of the metaphysical principles that our community is drawn to learn. Like, the book is there, the instructions are there, so we use them. I'm frequently offered the equivalent that appears in the Quran.
Yeah, that's true.
Now I don't know Muhammad's story and whether he needed to lean into forgiveness in the way that Christ did. Yeah. Right. Yeah. My guess is no, it wasn't the same. Right. And so, but again, it goes back to that embodiment piece.
Yeah.
But I would agree with you, having studied Buddhism, having looked at Taoism, having looked at some of these other, teachings, there certainly isn't a focus on forgiveness in the way that Christ brings it. Again, I feel no need for Christ to be more or less than anyone else.
Yeah.
I feel zero need for it. Mm-hmm. I'm just driven by an understanding of how reality works. Mm-hmm. And I guess I would describe it as what I'm being asked to do in this life that I've been given. What is my duty? Am I capable of obedience? Yeah. And at the same time, I mean, we're talking about a pretty central figure.
Yeah. Totally.
I really can't imagine Jesus where you have an NDE and you meet Jesus and he's like, you didn't like me more than the other prophets.
Right.
Like, what the heck? I think he would care more about what you embodied and what you learned throughout the course of your life.
Mm-hmm.
But as you were speaking,
but we will do that. I mean, again, that goes to the separation, right? That goes to the misutilization of who any of these people are, right?
Yeah, it's all expressions of the one source.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to ask you, as you were talking, especially regarding all of your work about mindset and psychology, Jesus stressed repentance as kind of the doorway to entering the kingdom. And I was wondering how you see that relating to personal growth and development, the auditing of one's mind and actions and heart.
What do you think Jesus meant by repentance?
I think he meant taking a sincere look at your life and being honest about what is out of alignment with love and truth. And then once you identify that, you work to make changes to the way you think and act.
Yeah.
That's my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's essential to personal growth. I think, well, look, there's a lot of flavors of personal growth out there, because personal growth can then weave into high performance, and then that moves into optimization. I was having a conversation with somebody who's in one of our coaching programs recently, and he was struggling, and he said, I just want to be more in flow. And I said, yeah, but you're talking about flow like flow states. You're wanting to be more in flow so you can produce better results. I said, that's different than being in surrender, right? Flowing with life is different than I want to be optimized.
Yeah.
And so when you look at the flavor of personal growth that I really like, which is, it requires doing an inventory and an audit. That's the beautiful part of my experience in 12-step, is that that's what the steps are. They're an inventory and an audit. And so, people can do that in a number of ways. You can sit down and actually take a look at your life. But the beautiful thing is that life is just going to reflect back to you the audit that's wanting to be seen right now too, right? Because if you really do create your reality, which should not be too shocking of a concept for most people based on just how behavioral psychology works and how neuroscience works. And we can talk about, whether or not we become too egotistical about us creating our reality versus some form of co-creation with a higher power, right? Which I think is an important perspective. But your life is always reflecting back to you what you need to look at. And so that's, one of the things that I believe is that in many ways there are no problems. Because any problem that you're presented with is just a mirror that's reflecting back to you what wants to be audited and what wants to be healed, right? Yeah. And then another important part, which is why I asked you about repentance, again, coming from my recovery background, is amends. Is acknowledging to someone else when you've done some harm.
Big part of 12-step.
Works worthy of repentance, Jesus.
Yeah. Right.
And I think, there's this idea, we teach a concept, which is, I'm not sure we want to unpack the whole thing here, but we talk about how there are only two states of being, powerful states and primal states. And powerful states are states of being that feel good, and primal states are states of being that don't feel good. And you're always in one state of being or the other, and you're never in two states at the same time. And an important distinction around that is the only thing that determines whether you're in a powerful state or a primal state is your own thinking. It's not the experience itself. Yeah. But one of the things that we discovered along the way of the last 10 years of us teaching the work that we teach, and now having tens of thousands of people who have gone through the work, it's a pretty big laboratory at this point, is that 100% of the time that you're actually thinking something that doesn't feel good, it's not true.
Yeah.
So what's actually happening is an incoherence in the body as a result of entangling with that idea that's not in alignment with the frequency of reality, which we could define as love, or always working for your greatest growth, your greatest prosperity, your greatest evolution, problem-free, abundant, all the things. So the moment you give a meaning to something that's not in alignment with the truth of reality, you feel that contraction in your system. And so oftentimes when people view their history and conclude that they did something wrong, the meaning they give that is, I shouldn't have done that. But one of the things that I believe is that, and by the way, that moves them into a primal state. So you look at that and you go, but that thinking that I shouldn't have done that thing, you're telling me that that's unintelligent thinking, that's not true, that I shouldn't have, hit my son, that I shouldn't have gone to the prostitute, that I shouldn't have stolen that thing. And the answer is, yeah, it is unintelligent thinking, because in that moment, based on your lived experience up until that moment and how you were thinking and perceiving in that moment, it was 100% predictable that you would do that thing.
Yes.
And you now Monday morning quarterbacking your consciousness and thinking that you should have been a better person than you were is actually preventing you from being the best person you can be right now. And that prevents people from taking full ownership because of the shame and the guilt around it, that
Totally.
belief that I shouldn't have done the thing, when really all you can do is learn from it and make an amends. I think the amends is really, really important, right? Hey, Aaron, I did this thing. I'm sorry.
Definitely.
Right? And you learn and move forward. But the reason why a lot of people get stuck is because of the inability to make an amends and the false judgment of themselves, thinking they could do something different than they really could. Now, you could go out to an extreme. You can come up with any example that you want, and I would still make the same case and say, no, I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm not saying that's a thing you should continue doing. I'm not saying that the thing you did to someone, we would not wish that on anyone.
Mm-hmm.
But it happened.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's
It
who you
happened
were.
for a reason.
That's who you were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
I love it. It's
Repentance.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
navigating repentance without shame or fear. It's doing it through a paradigm of love, it sounds like.
Yeah. In Greek, Jesus wouldn't have spoken this in Greek. He would have spoken in Hebrew or Aramaic. But in the Greek, we have it as metanoia. And metanoia means to turn around, to change your mind. And so I think of it using like computer coding or something is a good analogy. Because like you said, I think conditioning is deterministic. It's cause and effect. You have this belief, it's going to produce certain behaviors. So it doesn't make any sense to be like, oh, I shouldn't have done that.
Correct.
It's not intelligent. That's not an intelligent conclusion to come to, because instead you should be asking, why did I do that? And that would require you to look at the codes you're running, right? And so if a software engineer is programming something, a web browser, and they code it, they hit enter and they look at the web page and it's all messed up, they don't say, oh, this web page shouldn't have looked like this. They go, oh, where's the code wrong, right? And they go back to the code and they figure out where they made a mistake. And so you would never think to gaslight or question the result of the web page if you're coding, but we do it with ourselves because we don't realize that we're kind of running on codes as well, right? So I see repentance as a way of rewriting your codes, right? Change the code, change your mind, act from a new place, right?
Yeah, I think idealistically, you're 100% correct.
Mm-hmm. I only speak idealistically,
Right.
David.
And, and when you do something horrific to your own child, it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
we're talking about it in practice, right? According to the playbook. And then there's human emotion.
Yeah.
That's really, one of the beautiful and challenging things of being our species is the emotional experience, is the sensory experience. It's a very lived experience that we have. Mm-hmm. And it's 24/7. If you just think about the nature of our experiences, it's so sensory. I was on the airplane and I was thinking to myself, wow, like I can't just turn my ears off. I'm constantly translating vibration for what I hear. And, I can't turn my taste buds off. I can't eat something and decide, no, not right now. Let me just turn this switch off. Yeah. So, right. We have such a rich experience of life. And so when we do have these experiences that don't represent the best of who we're capable of being moving forward, it requires processing. It requires what's the word I'm thinking? Tenderness with ourselves.
Yeah, gentleness.
Yeah, gentleness. Like, being okay with the fact that everything we just said here is technically true. Mm-hmm. And, you need time to move through things.
Yes. Yep.
Like being a human being is not an easy experience.
Really?
It's a rich experience.
I think it's
right?
pretty easy. Come on.
But man, it's
yeah. I think we're on one of the most challenging planets in the universe in terms of if there's a gradient scale or something, planets 1 through 10 or whatever. I think we're on a planet that is uniquely challenging because we have this contrast of both polarities and extreme. We have a lot of light on this planet and a lot of darkness on this planet. And my cosmology is very much informed by the law of one. I don't know if you know that text very well, or
I heard you speak about it on a video once.
Okay, so a little bit.
Yeah.
And law of one really breaks it down well, where it says that Earth is what they call a third density planet. The 7 densities correlate to the 7 chakras, and planets also move through chakras / densities, kind of like we do. And so in the third density, it's supposed to be this way, where you have equal amount of light and dark, because the purpose of third density planets like ours is for the creator to allow every being to choose. This is something Jesus taught, called the 2 ways. He said, there's the narrow road that leads to life, and there's the broad road that leads to destruction. And in fact, scholars have identified this as the oldest Christian or Essene philosophy that was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls and the earliest Nazarene liturgy text about Jesus called the Didache. And they both begin exactly the same, saying there are two ways a person may choose, the way of life and the way of death. And there's a great difference between these two ways. And you kind of touched on this with the powerful state versus the primal state. So apparently our planet is supposed to be this maelstrom of light and dark so that we can get an equal taste, kind of like a buffet or something, have a little darkness, have a little light, and just keep doing that until we say, I really don't like the darkness. I'm going to choose light. And we go towards that path. But until that choosing happens, apparently the soul just has to be reincarnated back here again until a firm choice is made. And so we're always choosing, right? In that sense, every choice we make is really a choice between light and dark. And I think, as you would say, it really begins in how we're thinking.
Yeah, I'll double click on what you shared. I have a coach. She's my teacher. I've been working with her for a little over a year. She is the trainer for Waldorf education for all the teachers in Latin America. Nice. And up until recently, she only speaks Spanish. She's learning English because we want to incorporate her more into the work that we're doing in the world. Yeah. And other than my son also speaking Spanish with my Colombian wife, that and the fact that she speaks Spanish are the two big motivations for me to learn Spanish. So I've been learning Spanish because I wanted to be coached by her. So she's coaching me according to Rudolf Steiner's teachings. So Rosicrucian philosophy. Yep. And in Rosicrucianism, what came to mind as you were sharing was you predominantly have three characters. There's a fourth character, but you have three characters. You have Lucifer, Ahriman, and Christ.
Right.
And so you have these two other influences, right? Like Lucifer, who's different than Satan. Mm-hmm. Lucifer is
like the lust of the flesh.
Extreme emotionalism. Right? Yeah. Lust, flesh,
pleasure, hedonism,
hyper spirituality, spiritualism, right?
Yeah.
And I believe that has and this is not a criticism of someone's political party, but that's materialized as the far left.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Then you have Ahriman, and Ahriman is structure, technology, matter. Right?
Ahriman is a neocon.
Right, is a neocon. Right. That's exactly how it is. Right. Yeah. And so I can't remember where I read somewhere, it might have been ChatGPT that said really Earth is Ahriman's territory, at least right now. And so this is the totalitarian control. This is the censorship. This is the cryptocurrency. And the point is, we need both of those to find the Christic middle.
Yes.
Right. Neither one is bad. Yeah. To an extreme, it's destructive and it's not functional to a spiritual vision. Mm-hmm. But my teacher reminds me that these forces are all working through you, and we need these Luciferic forces. We need these Aramaic forces in order to start calibrating ourselves to the Christic middle, right? And again, I'm not a pro like you guys are, but I think there was this idea of don't stray too far to the left, don't stray too far to the right, but take the narrow middle path.
Mm-hmm. Yes, right? Totally.
It's so interesting how I think both the New Age and Christianity are actually highly Luciferic, because the Luciferian path is all about an extreme focus on the spiritual, like being pulled up into the spiritual realms, that is not grounded in nature. And if you look at Christianity and the doctrines about heaven and hell, you believe the right thing and you go to heaven or you go to hell, right? It's this kind of spiritual escapism in a way, whereas a Ahrimanic path would be like the businessman who has lost his connection to spirit, and it's all about making money and doing XYZ, getting these tasks done. Mm-hmm. So I think it speaks to your work really well about this middle Christic path, especially for entrepreneurs and people trying to navigate this world spiritually and in the material at the same time, to be successful and to spread love and joy and make a contribution in the world.
Yeah, we have two avatars. One is the spiritualist that is desiring to become more grounded, and the other is the high performer,
materialist,
materialist that's looking for the spiritual balance. Right? Those are our two avatars that we speak to, and of course that's what we see. Right? You have the high performer who believes that any goal can be achieved by hustling and grinding or taking your health or your relationships or your spirituality to the sacrificial altar of success. And then you have a lot of the, I'm not saying that those people can't be sweet, but you have this sweet new age spiritual energy healers and teachers who, are worried about whether or not they can pay their mortgage at the end of the month because they have a harder time applying the structure, right?
Yeah. Have you heard of a Steiner teacher named Edmund Knighton?
Haven't.
Okay. We had him in our podcast 3-4 months ago, and he's a Steiner expert and all that. He also works in Waldorf. And we were talking about the Ahriman, Lucifer, Christ distinctions. And we were also bringing up how religion really embodies a lot of the Ahriman with the control, and you have to believe certain things and do certain things. And if you mess up, you're out, you're heretic. Very, very controlling, very cult-like in that way, and thus very Ahrimanic. New Age, and we live here in Austin, which is kind of the bastion of the New Age world. We see this crazy Luciferic expression of that to this detrimental extreme of this free love, orgy parties, drug party, everyone's on K and all this stuff. Like, it's like licentiousness to an extreme.
You said that's what we were doing after the show, right?
No, you weren't. Come on, bro.
Cut it.
We're going to pray and meditate, right?
Okay.
And so, yeah, we've seen a lot of both. I've seen a lot of both. I've seen, at this point, 4 years in Austin, I've seen that a lot. And it's very, I don't want to go that direction, right? But then religion is the opposite extreme. I don't want to go that direction. And so if you're aware of those polarities, it does force you into the middle where you're like, look, there's a little bit of this that's good and a little bit of that that's good, but anything to an extreme becomes detrimental. And so I think I want to get into this subject with you of bypassing, spiritual bypassing. Because I see two different forms of it. I see one form of bypassing in religion and a different form of bypassing in like New Age. And I'll touch on the New Age one since that's more prevalent where we live. But with non-duality and other philosophies that are passed around in the New Age circles a lot, I think a lot of these teachings, and you touched on this a minute ago, like they just kind of naturally and in a way innocently facilitate spiritual bypassing when you tell people things like, there's nobody here, there's no thought, there's no thinker, there's just what is. So just if there's thoughts, just know they don't exist and stuff like that. And again, idealistically or whatever, that's technically true, that nothing is real other than source itself. But does that meet us in our human experience, where the human brain is thinking thoughts that do lead to outcomes that are positive or negative? And I think it tends to bypass that. And I went through this myself, trying to apply non-duality teachings very heavily for a number of years. I ran into this wall of all of the stuff that I was trying to just ignore away, netty away, was still there in the basement and coming back up for air and drowning me and pulling me down and stuff. And I'm like, wow, I guess all these non-duality teachings haven't served me very well, because I keep going through these dark nights of all these things that I've tried to ignore away that aren't going away. So like, what would you say to somebody who maybe has been on that journey and they're trying to find what is a good balancing point of like not being attached to thoughts and caught up in them, but also not totally ignoring them as if they're not real? Where would you advise someone to meet in the middle point? Or how would you?
Yeah, what occurred for me as you were speaking was, I think we all come here for an outcome that we decided when we came. So my personal belief is that just as I can look at my own life and see that it's made up of a bunch of different chapters, like it's one life but many lives, where I learn from an experience what I prefer and what I no longer prefer, and then I move into that next chapter and I hopefully embody that and I continue that over and over again. I assume that model of learning and growth that I have in this life continues life to life to life to life. So that's just my belief. By the way, that's just something I'm hypothesizing, but then I test it against my reality. Like I look at my own life and I go, is this hypothesis that I'm designing matching up with the evidence that I have of my own life? And it may be just a bias that I'm creating, but it works for me. Yeah. And so some people are called to, let's say, a monastic life in this life. That's clearly not the three of us. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here right now. Yeah. Now, there may be some, monastic carve-outs that we do as part of our spiritual practice.
We are in a temple, you guys.
We are in a temple.
Could be an ashram.
But I think we're meant to be out on the court and using the game of life as a way to grow spiritually.
100%.
And so I think a lot of times, I know you were speaking very specifically like around, do I choose to work with the information that my thoughts are providing, or do I try to just allow the thoughts to pass? Because
can you just ignore them away?
But I also think you can take that to a macro where people are just like, yeah, man, I'm just like living my day to day and just kind of flowing with it. And I do think as we talk about Lucifer and Ahriman, the opportunity is to truly acknowledge the desires you have and go pursue them. And as you do that, you will start to calibrate and have a better understanding of which of those desires were egoically driven and which of those were actually visions that I was given from my higher power. So you build that discretion over time as you go out and you pursue your desires. And then as you're pursuing your desires and creating a structure to take action on a daily basis, what you then learn is when I'm being too structured and not just allowing in my life, or when I'm allowing too much and I don't have enough structure to be productive and constructive, right? So this is the dance.
Yep.
And someone could experience that just as you have and you've articulated even in your own personal growth. You're like, I lean to one side and I'm like, okay, I'm just allowing my thoughts to occur. But then I realized, well, but some of these thoughts just aren't passing and maybe there's information here and it's part of the programming that I should take a look at. Yeah. So I don't have a clear-cut answer for anyone because everybody's at a different point in their own timeline. Mm-hmm. But just, recognizing that this is a learning process and we go from not having enough structure and learning that to implementing structure and over-structuring and learning and we go back and forth, right? Yeah. This is we're charting a course towards the potential of how would I describe this? We're on a journey towards the outcome that we decided excited us when we came, which is different for all of us, but I think a similar way to describe it for all of us is just the evolution of our consciousness, right? And the way that we get there is it's a zigzag, right? As you continue to bounce too far to the left and too far to the right, even in the way you do your personal development work. Yeah.
It's kind of like a vibration, like a 2D vibration, and you could draw a line right down the middle. And that's kind of like our center point, but we're always up and downing around it or spiraling around it. That's part of the human game. Like you're not going to get out of the need for organization and structure in your life. And you're not going to get out of the need for allowance and surrender.
And it's okay, by the way, like everything is okay.
Yeah.
So it's okay to spiritually bypass because at some point in time, it's going to confront you in a deep enough way that you'll have the opportunity to course correct. Whether you do or not is choice.
Yeah.
Right? That's the free will part of it. But the system is designed to give you the opportunity to continue to grow. And that's really part of the loving kindness of all of it. It's like, no matter what you choose, God is right there behind you, setting up the next piece that is going to give you the opportunity to move towards that next level of growth.
Amen.
It's like this reconfiguring system all around you all the time. And that's that beautiful love that a father has for his child, right? It's like your child. I mean, I don't do that with my 3-year-old because he needs more oversight, right? But at some point in time, you start to step back, right? But a really loving father allows their son or their daughter to make a mistake, but is there to support them in that next piece, right?
One of the foundations of this podcast is that God is good. Like God is truly good and this universe is truly good. So I was curious how that informs what you teach, because I've heard you speak about this, that you believe in the goodness of the future. Why is it so important to understand that God's nature is good and loving for how we navigate life?
Well, on one level, I think it's important because of the way the brain works and because of the way vibration works. In other words, it could be a God-SIBO effect. Like maybe
God-SIBO, I never heard that.
Yeah, like maybe God's not loving, but if you believe that God is loving, then that's what you experience. Like that's neuroscience, neurophysiology, psychology, the vibrational theory, it's all of it, right? So for one reason, that's why it's important, because it's like Einstein says, the most important decision you make is whether you live in a friendly or a hostile universe.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
And that may be the only answer to the question, right? Like why is that important? Everything else to me feels like that I might say is just sort of subjective. But it sets the tone for your entire perception of reality.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would say like, but that's it's not existential enough for me, right? It's like, but I need to know that the creator is love so I can live at peace in my nervous system here. Because it's not good enough for me to just know that if I think it, it'll feel true.
I think you're right. I think that's very important too. That would be the other piece. Is it's important because it's the only way that you can experience peace. Otherwise, you're at the whim of your external circumstances, right? If it's just you in an inherently chaotic cosmos, then how could you ever be still?
Exactly.
How could you ever be calm?
Yeah,
right?
and subconsciously, if you think that you get out of line or believe the wrong thing, you're going to roast in hell for eternity. That's kind of destabilizing.
It's like nihilism 2.0.
Yeah.
Well, you're right. When you come out of, I don't know what we would call it, like religious trauma.
Yeah.
Right. Then that reorientation to a loving God is supremely important.
Yeah, and we always say you're made in the image of God, whether it's the true God or a false God. For instance, like if people, depending on how they interpret elements of the Hebrew Bible, like the stories of Amalek and genocide and slavery and all this stuff, there's people in the world right now who are made in the image of that false God, and then they go out into the world and act like that.
Yeah.
So whatever we believe about God, we're made in that image.
Yeah. Well, to tell a child that, I remember looking at like a Catholic image of Jesus on the cross, hanging there bloodied and stuff. And I don't know, maybe 8 years old or something, and having these thoughts of like, oh, wow, like the message was sinking in that I'd been taught. Because it takes a while for a kid to understand, what the hell are they talking about? Died for my sins so I don't have to what? But all of a sudden, as 8 or 9 years old, I'm starting to get the message more. And I'm looking at Jesus and realizing, oh my God, that's what my Heavenly Father would have done to me if Jesus hadn't stepped in. And all of a sudden, I have this megalomaniacal view of the Creator in my mind that from that point until 23, 24, when I deconstructed and left Christianity, had haunted me in the subconscious every moment of my life. That angry God that wants violence and did that to Jesus, like he's watching me. And when I have a lustful thought, when I cuss or whatever, that God's getting angry at me, and that doesn't feel good. So I better be in line. And then all of a sudden your entire spiritual path is just full of anxiety because you have this fear of who God really is. And like, that's what's back of everything, I think, for everybody. It's like Einstein's quote, what do you really believe is the fundamental nature of God or the universe you live in?
Yeah, I mean, it's an important part of both your journeys, right? So it was by design.
Right.
And I didn't have to experience that, but I saw a lot of people coming into 12-step recovery and like accepting God was challenging for a while. We have people who come into our community who have gone through, religious trauma. And so it requires a space. But I think the other reason why it's important and why I believe in the certainty of the goodness of the future is because I've interrogated my own history. Like I've actually looked at it and seen, I cannot find something that I cannot now see, which I would have labeled a problem at that time, working out for me. Right. Every single challenge I've had and every problem I had led to, in fact, the bigger the problem, the greater the thing that I cherish in my life right now as a result of the cause and effect from that problem. So why is it also important? Because I think it's a proper reflection on your life. Now, certainly there are some things that are still in flight, right? but I've seen it enough times that I know that those planes are going to land.
Yeah.
Too,
faith.
Right? Yeah. Now, at the same time, I invite myself to have compassion for people who don't see it that way, because I think about, especially being a father now, like if I lost a loved one or a child, I understand. There are people who do not have closure to that yet and may not have closure until after they leave this physical world. And that's even an assumption that they will have closure at that point in time, like that there'll be context and understanding as you return to the Father. But like I hold space for all of that too.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, man, as a new dad, year and a half behind you, my daughter's about a year, 9 months old. And I'm sure you went through this too. Like I had never even considered that I would have the fear one day of my child dying.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what it was like to have a kid.
Of course.
And then when that beautiful little divine being comes into your world and you feel this unbelievable, like heart-wrenching love for this being. That was the first time that the genuine fear of what if my daughter, some accident happened, and almost like little panic attack inside. Oh no, I can't even imagine that. I don't want that reality. And then please God, don't let my child die. And then I'm like, whoa, what am I doing? I'm asking God not to kill my child. Like, this is a pretty crazy spiral. But again, like you said, we don't know something until life teaches us what it's actually like. Like, life is the teacher at the end of the day. I mean, you and I, we're teachers. We teach things on YouTube, but we're not really teaching people, right? We're giving them blueprints and instructions to use as a map in their life. But we're like, go out into your life, please, and experience this truth. And that's how you learn it and integrate it. And I think one of the other detriments of religion in particular is not just that they don't actually emphasize anything Jesus taught, like, at all. But even if they did, you're in this little bubble world, this little Christian bubble world, where you're not actually experiencing much of life. And that was one of the biggest, probably the biggest piece of liberation I felt, that I still remember when I left my church and I left Christianity, was I realized, oh my God, there's like an entire world out there that I've never experienced. Like, even something silly like dinosaurs were real. And, I started obsessing over dinosaur documentaries, and then going to concerts and watching movies I wasn't allowed to watch. And it was like, wow, am I allowed to experience life like this? And I started to learn and grow and evolve spiritually at a super rapid pace, because I realized that in my whole life in Christianity, I was kind of locking myself in this Christian bubble world, Christian school, Christian church. 3 days a week, I'm in church. I'm watching Christian shows at home. I didn't want to expose myself to the evil outside world that would actually teach me these lessons and help me integrate things, So that can be super detrimental in religion as well.
I'm wondering too, if there's not an opportunity, as I'm hearing and feeling through this conversation, because it's not every day that I have a conversation, number one, like this, but number two, with people who came to this conversation through your paths, through religion, right?
Yeah.
But if we believe that all things are working for us, then the church has had to play a significant beneficial role in what we're talking about, right? And it seems that like that's actually the structure that may have amplified the awareness of Jesus around the world, and it's just part of the process of people getting into that structure, becoming aware, and then growing their awareness in a more authentic sense, right, on the backside of it.
Something I've been really fascinated with in my life is, since I left church, is studying cults and cult leaders, and like, how do people fall into these belief systems? How do these leaders succeed at getting so many people into their thought system? And they just get chewed up and spit out in the worst ways, And I saw that religion was really a cult, but like a much larger, more well-organized cult, but it's got all the same archetypes. There's a man on the stage. He's got all the answers outsourced to him. You're not allowed to interact with people that aren't Christian outside the group, like all the same stuff. And it was through that I became fascinated in, why did I get hooked into that? Well, I was born into it, so I didn't really have a choice to some extent. But why did I wake up to it so quick at 23 years old? And there's 70-year-old people in this church that have believed this their whole life, and they apparently aren't questioning it. And I think it comes down to, what level of evolution is your soul at? Some people are probably coming in with less accumulative incarnations or lifetimes to learn these things. And so church works for them, and it's a path that actually will benefit them to get from point A to point B in their evolution. But for me, the way it benefited me was by chewing me up and spitting me out and teaching me these painful lessons, right?
Well, you needed those people too, because if you didn't have the experience that you had, we wouldn't be having this conversation here
exactly
today. And if you didn't have some people who were sitting there kind of playing the supporting cast, you wouldn't have been sitting anywhere. There would have been no people sitting in the pews or sitting in the church. So, and that's where I think there's an opportunity to go like, holy shit, there is so much here that is working for me. Like, other people are actually coming into this incarnation potentially knowing that they're just going to stay fairly stagnant on this one, because they're just going to sit on my bench. They're going to be bench players. I'm actually going to be on the court the whole time.
Yeah. And
all of this is supporting me. I mean, there really is an opportunity to step back and go, wow, like, is actually everything here just for me? I mean, I think that is one of the mysteries of what I would just describe as, it's sort of like the mystery of the Christian God.
Yeah.
Is that not only is it a personal relationship with you, it's simultaneously a personal relationship with everybody else, and the orchestration of the whole show.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty mind blowing when you get present to it.
Yeah. Because you're also like, wow, not all of us have the same relationship with the same God.
And that's why it would seem a little absurd to go, well, if you don't actually believe in my God, then you're eternally damned. It's like, well, wait a minute. But, I look at it too as like, this is when I found forgiveness for my mom. Not that I don't get triggered from time to time, but my core program that I've worked through in my life sounds something like, there's something wrong with me. And my mom embodied there's something wrong with me. She was told by her mom that, her mom wished that she was never born. And so a natural reaction that my mom would have to that is, well, then there's something terribly wrong with me. My mom had chronic health conditions that started in her 40s, which was the manifestation of there's something wrong with me.
Of course. Yeah.
And for a while I was frustrated that I didn't have a different relationship with my mom than the relationship that I have. Until I realized, like, in that conversation, I'm the problem. I'm expecting my mom to have a relationship with me that she's not capable of having.
Yeah.
And it's also a relationship she wasn't supposed to have with me in this life, because I believe she came in and said, look, I'll carry that trauma and I'll never transform it. I'll do that in a future one. But I'm going to hand it off to David, because David's capacity to transform that, it's going to become his superpower.
Yeah.
And he's going to be able to help so many other people be able to do that.
Let's go.
Right. So, when I look at it that way, what is there to resent of my mom? Yeah. And I think when you have proper perspective, this goes back to the idea of like, it is a loving system. It is a loving God. I believe in the certainty of the goodness of the future. Life is always working for my greatest growth, my greatest prosperity, and my greatest evolution. There are no problems, right? It allows us to then observe all the other actors, whether it's mom or dad, or the person at the gas pump, or the neocons, or traditional Christianity, and go, yeah, it's all supposed to be that way.
Yeah, man.
It's all supposed to be that way.
Yep.
Right? And that was the teaching,
Mm-hmm.
right? That was the teaching. But easier said than done, because we don't have proper perspective. We have a perspective of individuation. We have a perspective of division. We have a perspective of duality. We have a perspective of, right?
Yeah.
And so going back to where we started this conversation, the invitation is to transcend all of that. And we have a model for what that transcending looks like.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, whether it's like near-death experiences or mystical experiences in general, spiritual awakenings, plant medicine journeys, like these kinds of peak experiences often reveal to people what you're describing. I know you said after 5-MeO, this was the stunning clarity you had, was like, it's all absolutely perfect and blemishless. Every problem in my life is perfect and is supposed to be there, and it's all for my highest good. And it's a very childlike realization when you have it. It's like, oh yeah, like mom and dad love me. It's all fine. And that's where we should live,
Yeah, and now, can we build the capacity to experience that as our base reality?
So can you take us through this transformation process that you were hinting at before?
Well, so there are three anchor distinctions. And it comes from the perspective of personal growth and achieving goals and creating your own reality. But what we find is that as people embrace the practice and they practice it, they change and they build a nervous system that has all of the capacities that we're talking about, that's no longer just focused on achieving goals. In other words, invite people in and tell them you're going to give them what they want and then give them what they need, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, which was also my experience. So the first of the three distinctions that we teach is desire plus non-resistance equals desired result. We call it the golden equation.
Nice.
If you have any desire that is in your heart or in your mind, and we talked about the distinction between the two, the mind can be an egoic desire and the heart is more of a calling to something. But whatever desire you have, if you can maintain a non-resistance to the desire, 100% of the time, consistently and predictably, that desire will crystallize or materialize into your reality, with one big asterisk: according to the will of God. Right?
Yeah.
So, and we don't market the asterisk, but we can talk about it here, because some people are not into God yet, right?
Right.
They're just wanting to find their soulmate. That's their desire. Make $1 million. That's their desire. Overcome their anxiety. That's their desire. Reinvigorate the intimacy and the broken relationship they have with their spouse. That's their desire.
Yeah.
Find their purpose. That's their desire.
Which is all God anyway.
The challenge is that the moment, and Abraham Hicks and Esther Hicks talk about this, the moment you have a desire, the propensity is to notice the absence of the thing that you want. And then the mind gives an explanation for the absence.
Yeah.
And we very quickly just start focusing on the absence of it. That's the resistance.
Yeah.
So
you're saying it's the resistance towards not having the desire?
it's the resistance to the thing. So I'll give you an example. Let's say, this is actually a really great example. So I started my podcast in July of 2023, and I recorded an episode every single week. And it was about a year later, and I was getting around 5,000 viewers a month on the channel. And I didn't understand it, because I had studied how to optimize my YouTube channel. I thought my content was really, really good. We talked about this before the show. I was working on my packaging, my thumbnail, all the stuff. And I would look at other channels and I would see them growing, and I wouldn't understand why my channel wasn't growing. Well, the meaning I gave that experience was I must be doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is the meaning I give a lot of experiences in my life. It goes back to
something's wrong
with me,
yeah.
Right? And a variety of other observations, right? I might have a thought which is like, well, what if the show never starts to perform at a higher level? Maybe other people's content are better than mine. I'd move into comparing. That's the resistance. But that's telling me about myself. That's the current state of my consciousness. And so if I'm willing to actually work with the current state of my consciousness, which is the reaction that I'm having to the thing that I want, that doesn't feel good, it's moving me into a primal state, now I'm working with the resistance. If I can transform the resistance, 100% of the time, given enough time, the result will produce itself. What was interesting is my son was born during that period of time. And when my son was born, I stopped caring about the performance of my show. I had a mentor who once told me, what you make matter becomes matter. Right?
Wow.
She said, we human beings are matterfiers. And so what matters, matterfies. And what I was making matter was the underperformance of my podcast. That's what mattered to me.
We were just talking about this.
Yeah.
We were talking about how to lower things in importance in your mind when your mind is too
well, a child will do that. A child will rearrange the entire physics of your universe, right?
Yeah.
Like literally, it rearranges the whole structure and energy, the constellation of your own personal universe.
Completely.
And so all that mattered to me during that period of time was my son. What stopped mattering was the underperformance of my podcast. And you know what happens when the underperformance of a podcast stops mattering?
It performs.
And that was exactly when my podcast started taking off. So what we've been indoctrinated into, and by the way, these are ancient teachings. You can find them across right? Non-resistance, non-attachment, right? And so what most of us have been indoctrinated into is desire plus hustle and grind equals desired result, or desire plus have enough time or have enough money equals desired result, or desire plus have enough Instagram followers equals desire, or be smart enough or have enough certifications equals desired result. And so we spend that middle portion, which is most of our life, running around doing things that are not correlative at all, and in fact prevent the result that we want. So the beautiful thing about desire plus non-resistance equals desired result is, again, I think it goes back to that, what Jesus said, which is like, my yoke is easy, right? This isn't complicated. You actually get to desire and enjoy your life, and you'll produce the desired result. Now, the Luciferians would say, does that mean I get to just sit on the sofa eating cheesy poofs all day long and watching Netflix and hoping someone delivers $1 million business to my, Amazon delivers something to my doorstep? No. We get up every day, we take action. There are going to be challenges, we work through them. That's the spiritual practice, right? So the transformation starts with have a desire, and now use that desire to understand where you are in the development of your consciousness and start to work with the information. Okay. So then you go, how do I know if I'm in resistance? And we go back to the two states of being. Because whenever you're in a primal state, you're entangled with the resistance, the thought or the idea that is the limiting belief.
Survival, fight or flight.
Yeah. Or scarcity, lack, low self-esteem, something about yourself. I think about, we move into impossibility in our minds. And when we move into impossibility in our minds, we move into a primal state. And again, tying this back into the Jesus way, I'm assuming it was Christ who said, all things are possible to he that believeth. Someone said that, right?
Yep.
And so we need to take that literally, all things. There are no things that are impossible. But when we move into believing in impossibility, our system contracts. Our nervous system upregulates. So we say, well, the game I'm playing is non-resistance. I'm going to dream. I'm going to hope. I'm going to receive what the Father has in store for me, what I'm being called to, the mission I'm being assigned. Those are the desires. By the way, sometimes the mission is you go and you buy the nice car at the car lot because that's part of your vision and God's in alignment with it.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't have to be going and saving the world or whatever altruistic thing there is, or
just
feeding
the right next step.
Whatever the right next step. You get to have a beautiful spiritual vision. You also get to have a beautiful life vision.
Yeah.
Right. So we play the game of non-resistance, which is also the game of faith. How do we know when we're doubting or when we're in resistance? We notice how we're feeling and we move into a primal state. And then we identify the thinking. This is sort of the third step of the playbook. We identify the thinking that is causing us to move into a primal state, and we know that it's not true. And we start to interrogate that thinking, right? We start to interrogate the impossibility that we are cursing ourselves with, and use whatever tools. We have a certain set of tools, right?
Yeah.
That you can to transform impossibility into possibility, which is also a transformation of fear into faith, which is the expansion of your consciousness and the enhancement of your relationship with the God of your own understanding.
Yeah.
So that's the model, right? In that, there's a lot of nuances. I told you I'm really excited because later this year we're launching Whole Human with the Whole Human framework. We designed a 12-step framework based on my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous, combined with the work that we teach, because people need systems, they need frameworks, they need a map, right? Sermon on the Mount was a map, right? The Ten Commandments are a map.
Yep.
And so people need a map. And so we've taken all this and we've put it into a journey that allows you to identify and get clear on what your desires are, identify and transform your resistance, identify and heal your resentments, build a deeper relationship with your higher power, and then be in service to others. So that's the living framework that, I've never articulated it this way, but is our way of helping people be like Christ. And that's what we're really talking about.
Wow.
I love it, man.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I'm a framework nut because I needed that to make sense of spirit. I needed a structured understanding.
Some guardrails.
Yeah. And then to also implement it in my life and actually practice it.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the other thing is, if you don't have a practice, you're not going to get good at it. Yeah. And what I see, and there's no judgment here, is people lack an effective spiritual practice. They lack an effective practice for embodying the principles of Christ or any principles they want to follow. We have a much clearer path for practicing yoga, like in the yoga studio or practicing jujitsu,
Right.
than we do for this.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I learned with the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous is you have to be in a daily practice.
Yeah.
And you have to be doing it with other people. I mean, science tells
That's
us,
big, yeah.
right? We have to be in fellowship. And that's also why I'm really excited about Whole Human, because it's where our community is coming together to be in a daily rhythm of living,
Yeah.
right? According to these principles. It's essential.
I couldn't agree more, man. Community is also probably the most impactful thing that I do as well in my community, is just let people talk to one another and be on the journey together. Most of the magic and the codes come in just from the fellowship aspect. But I think first of all, I love your framework. I love the model you're putting out there. And I think it's tapping into another big subject I wanted to talk to you about today, which is the shadow. A lot of what you're describing is the way that our shadow comes up to sabotage our desires. You're unworthy, something's wrong with you, etc. And have you ever read the Gospel of Thomas?
No, but it keeps showing up recently.
Yeah, you'd love it. Tons of codes in it. There's a passage where Jesus says, when you make the two one, when you make the male as the female, the inside as the outside, etc., then you shall enter the kingdom of heaven. And then similarly in, I think, Matthew, Jesus says, if you make the eye single, which is kind of like make the two one, your whole body will be flooded with light. But basically, if your eye remains dual, then your whole body will be full of darkness. And there's many ways to craft a mystical interpretation of what he's pointing at, and they can all have truth to them. But one of the ways I've really thought about that verse is through shadow work and the Jungian lens of how the moment that I desire to embody some kind of virtue or ideal, I want to be humble, I want to be generous, I want to be seen as kind, I want to be seen as intelligent. Whatever the ideal is that I'm trying to call in and embody will instantly create a shadow of its opposite in my subconscious mind, because that's the only way that the human mind really knows how to go for something in the world of duality, is it can only know something by its opposite, right? So when I want something, my mind says, well, then what's the opposite of what I want? Oh, it's being a loser, or being stupid, right? Now I have to suppress any part of me that feels stupid or whatever so that I can go towards the desire. So resist this, move towards that. And that's logical to the human mind, but it creates all kinds of problems. So I feel like Jesus has to be speaking to this concept of making the two one, the shadow and light sides of your personality. And when I say light, I mean the part of you that you show outwardly, right? The protector self that performs and tries to act like the virtues to get people to accept it. You got to make both of those one, and then you will enter the kingdom. And so I think shadow work is one of the most misunderstood, and because of that, kind of neglected areas of spiritual practice in the world, especially in the New Age circle. Well, I would say especially in non-duality, but there's a lot of that in the New Age. And what the problem I've seen with that is that when it comes to manifestation, people will approach it without a lot of the frameworks you're laying out there and believe that if I just keep on seeing it and feeling it and visualizing it, it will eventually come in. And sometimes that works, but sometimes it doesn't, because you haven't dealt with those underlying codes in the shadow that are telling you you're not worthy of it or whatever. So do you have any kind of framework for, or do you teach people about their shadow, and kind of how do you approach that whole subject?
So a couple of things that occur for me as you were sharing. One is the importance of wholeness. Like, I think we could talk about that union as just wholeness.
Yeah, totally.
And then in that wholeness, we're not denying the parts of ourselves that are there. And there's really good work out there. I don't know if you'd consider it shadow work or not, but like family systems.
Yeah, totally.
Right? Like
parts work,
parts
IFS.
work. What also occurred for me is some of the work that I'm doing more recently with my teacher, who I told you about, which is somatic work. Like, we're doing work in the body where I'm fully feeling and experiencing all of that, and then it integrates. Yeah. Because I'm no longer, again, goes back to desire plus non-resistance equals desired result, right? Yeah. It's like the resistance just continues to perpetuate the problem.
Yeah.
And those shadows, you know, I heard you describe it as I have a desire, and then there's a reflective shadow side of it. Mm-hmm. Another way of looking at it is like those shadows have been there a long, long time. And, you know, I suppress those shadows and build coping mechanisms for them that have evolved into my personality, and therefore are so close to me that I can't even see them. Yeah, in many ways, you could consider the personality as a coping mechanism for your traumas.
Yep.
And so, important to do the integrative work. Otherwise, there's always going to be something in the cache, right? That's compelling you to make decisions that are not clean. That's okay, because then in the reaction to those decisions, you'll get reflected back to shadow again, and you can work with it.
Yeah.
So I do think it's important. I'm very much interested in somatic work now. I think some of the processes that we teach early on, when someone identifies a limiting belief, which you could call a limiting belief a shadow.
Yeah.
We use that awareness to build a belief that sits on the light spectrum of it. And we start to support and reinforce that new belief or new decision.
Yeah.
But for some of the deeper stuff, I've seen that the integration pieces are absolutely necessary. Mm-hmm. And then in the manifestation space, it can feel much easier to do the visualization, the pineal gland opening, all the stuff than like to do the shadow work. Yeah. The shadow work's not fun. It doesn't feel good to go back and think about how uncomfortable I was at a particular point in time and really allow my body to fully experience it. Yeah. It's much easier to just do some Kundalini exercise that feels great. Yeah. But then you're building this amplification on top of an unwhole infrastructure.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. And I, there's a lot of conversation around how that becomes problematic in people's lives. I don't get too much into like demonic or entity type of conversations, right? But they're out there. Yeah. And how a lot of the even very popular teachers are sort of amplifying some of this stuff. I don't know. But what I do know for me is that it's clear in my own life experience that as I started to get into law of attraction and manifestation, when I was building it from a more egoic driven place, it didn't produce the kind of results that I wanted.
Yeah.
And it taught me that lesson. I would also say that I think there is a lot, especially as you get into the teachings of, say, like Neville Goddard. It's like the feeling is the secret. Mm-hmm. And so it's this idea that, you sit down and you visualize what it is that you want, and then somehow you're supposed to amplify your emotion into it to like force it upon the field. Then it sculpts the field back into your reality. And just as I'm saying that, it doesn't feel right?
Yeah, there's more happening there. Yeah.
But that's kind of like it's like a means to an end. It's like, well, rather than heal yourself, you just need to get good at forcing yourself onto the field to get what you want. But I did an episode recently on how I truly believe that that's an improper understanding of visualization, because what I've experienced is the more that I'm willing to do the work to heal myself, visualization is not something I do, it's something that occurs to me. The vision comes.
Yeah.
I don't have to sit down and force it.
Totally.
Right? I'm going for a walk in nature, I'm getting a good workout in, I'm driving from point A to point B. And that's a byproduct of creating space within me through this integration that you're talking about in this union. Mm-hmm. So I do think in that sense, going back to the bypassing, there's a ton of bypassing in the law of attraction and sort of create your reality space.
Yes.
But that's okay, because, eventually people have the opportunity to learn.
Yeah. Bypassing is a teacher too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Have you studied much of Ken Wilber's work?
The name is familiar.
Ken Wilber, he's a philosopher, spiritual philosopher. I think he has the best system for what you're talking about, which is, it's called integral theory, which you may have heard of too, but he addresses what I think is the single biggest problem in the spiritual world, and has been for a long time, which is that there isn't just kind of one category or line of development in spirituality. There's multiple lines of development we should focus on. And so he classifies them as waking up versus growing up versus cleaning up. And then there's a few other like tertiary ones too, but those are the big three. And he says that very accurately so, that 99% of spiritual enthusiasts and people practicing spirituality in any way are primarily just focusing on the waking up, which has to do with reaching higher states of consciousness. So we'll have a plant medicine journey, a deep meditation or whatever, and you reach a peak state. And we've all done this. I've done this a million times, where you think, okay, so the goal of the spiritual path is for me to keep that peak state all the time in my human experience. So I've got to reach that state again and get used to it and integrate it more. And that's actually just one category of development. And you'll never integrate that state if you don't focus on the growing up and the cleaning up. And so growing up is, of course, spiritual and I would say personal maturation. Your kind of like your structures of consciousness, how you make meaning out of things, growing in those areas where you can hold multiple perspectives in mind and not just be limited to one perspective all the time. Those things are growing up, right? And then cleaning up is the shadow work. So much of spiritual practice is focused on the waking up that you get this tiny slice of the pie for most of us that actually deals with growing and cleaning up, because it doesn't sell tickets, right? It's not as sexy to mature and clean up your shadow as it is of, hey, let's go to this retreat. We're going to blast open the third eye with breathwork journeys. It's the sexy stuff that sells. But I think we're coming into a like a new season on our planet of how we understand spiritual development as a species, and realizing like, hey, we've actually left these other major categories like totally untended. And it's time to grow up and clean up a little bit too, right? Not just wake up.
Yeah, it reminds me of the top of the funnel. So it's like you get a bunch of people
analogy
to download a lead magnet, and even fewer actually watch the webinar, and even fewer actually purchase the product, right? And I've talked about this as personal development 1.0 versus personal development 2.0, and the distinction between those two is really like motivation and inspiration versus transformation.
Yeah,
and that's okay, because there have been great motivational, inspirational teachers that have brought in tens of millions of people into the top of the funnel.
Yes.
And I think that everything that's going on in the world, the way that we're all interconnected through social media, the access to education that we have on YouTube, all those pieces is actually widening the top of the funnel.
Yes.
But, it may be that you always have at the top of the funnel awakening. And
totally.
Then is that what the first phase, awakening?
Waking
up, right? And then growing up, and then cleaning up, right?
Very few are left at the cleaning up point.
The cleaning up. So those numbers will keep growing, but proportionally. It's again, it reminds me even like of a webinar. It's like people register, and some people show up, and some people stay until the end.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Yeah.
And some people watch the replay later.
And some people watch the replay.
And from those, how many actually implement it?
Right. Yeah. It's very, very few that make it all the way down the funnel.
Yeah.
But it's like, we're not saying we should want to wake up less, is your point. Like we should still wake up with as much fervor, but let's grow up and clean up with as much fervor as well.
Yeah. Because to your point before, some people are here to wake up. Some people are here to grow up. Yeah. Some people are here to clean up. Some people grow up on the next one, right? Because everybody's playing their role. Yes. Because if everybody was like cleaning up at the same time, it probably
we'd all be
work,
miserable
right?
together.
So.
It's like if a business had
all entrepreneurs,
50 marketing officers,
right?
That business,
no accountants,
yeah. And I think that's an important perspective to be able to embody the principles that we're talking about. Because I find it's very easy for me to become judgmental about a lot of different things on a day-to-day basis, but I forget that no, it's a cast of characters, right? And it goes back to that idea of everything's working out exactly the way that it should. We want to talk about it, and we want to observe it, and we want to have a commentary about it, and which is fine. But then you see a proliferation of that today too. It's really interesting to me because it's like another set of conversations I pay attention to, which James and I dropped in on, and when I met him, is like what's going on in the world, right? Totalitarian control. You're obviously hip to it because you mentioned the neoconservative movement, all the different pieces and casting characters that are taking that are creating the show right now.
Yeah.
And then independent media emerges, and that becomes very, very exciting because now we're all talking about it. Yeah. But now we're all talking about it, right? And Christ said, "Turn the other cheek." Yeah. He didn't say keep watching episode after episode after episode because the algorithm is going to keep feeding you on the evil empire.
Yeah, keep looking for the next conspiracy.
Yeah, and so it's something to really start to become sensitive to, because there's this. I know I'm switching gears here a little bit, but there's this nuance of but I need to stay informed. Yeah. But we need to stop those things, and I very much think that we're in a time right now, where we don't overthrow the momentum of totalitarian control and one world government and all these pieces. Again, this is sort of in the theme of maintaining our non-judgment, right? Whether it's our observation of people as they progress through their spiritual journey, whether it's the judgment that we have of ourselves, of what we should have done before, shouldn't have done before, we've covered those topics, right? And now it's the judgment of what's happening in the world, because it's very easy as well to have judgment when you look at what's happening, with the Holocaust in Gaza or, right? And so then you go, well, what does it really mean that I'm supposed to give the enemy my other cheek? But I think the stories are there that show us the way forward while embodying the principles that are Christ principles, because we're not going to change any of that structure. What we're being invited to do is to walk away from it. You know,
I thought we just had to vote in the right guy and all the problems would go away.
maybe that is the solution, right? That's in the gospel of somebody. But you know, I do think it is the story of Moses leading the Hebrews out of the totalitarian control of Pharaoh, right? It's like they didn't overthrow Pharaoh. They walked away into a place that was called the Promised Land, and it was scary because they couldn't see it.
And didn't go so well
there,
for them,
right? They wanted to head back, right? But like, you know, that's the idea. So again, I am regularly in an inquiry of noticing when I'm judging something and wondering how the proper perspective is non-judgment, and then finding those perspectives because I'm in the inquiry.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so happy you brought the conversation here because we talk about kind of this global parasitic control system a lot and how to approach it with the Jesus way. And you're totally right about the alternative media too. It's great that we have these new voices and different perspectives, but often they peddle so much fear and hysteria instead of arming people to embody virtue in their lives.
Yeah.
I think that's really what changes the world. You talked about the 4-minute mile and things like that. Like, and there's maps of consciousness where people vibrating at pure peace can offset millions of people vibrating in fear and hatred.
Yeah.
So it's almost like us pursuing truth and virtue with all of our hearts, as opposed to staying attuned to every new atrocity in the Middle East, will bear a lot more good fruit than some kind of political movement.
Or just focusing on the negative all the time.
Yeah.
That the truther movement has really got drawn up into that. And there's conspiracies, like they're true. A lot of them are true, right? So it's not
what
like
they say the difference between a conspiracy and fact is 8 months. Or
yeah, 6 months, I think.
6
yeah,
months.
How true that is.
It's getting shorter all the time too.
Like
Right.
6 days now.
Yeah. Well, we went and watched Disclosure Day. Have you seen the movie yet?
I haven't.
Are you going to watch it?
Spielberg UFO movie.
Oh yeah, it looked interesting.
It's super good. Highly recommend everybody to watch it. But we went and saw it with our friends, and there was a lot of conversation with our friends leading up to seeing it because it's a Steven Spielberg movie. And Steven Spielberg's, you know, in Hollywood, he's part of the cabal and stuff, right? We're assuming. And one of our friends was like, oh, how could that movie possibly be good? Steven Spielberg's the director. We already know that he's a Luciferian cabal member, Zionist, whatever. And so you shouldn't watch the movie. It's all brainwashed programming and stuff. And I was connecting to what he was saying, and in my being, it just felt like such a negative, detrimental viewpoint to have that, to your point earlier about what would you rather believe, that God is love or not? And it's just better for you to believe that God's love, right? Same thing here. It's like, do I want to live in a world where anyone who's interacted with elites is definitely evil and coming to kill me and stuff? Do I want to look at people like Steven Spielberg and say, I already know that guy's evil and can't have a good intention? And the answer for me was clear. In my system, no, I don't want to hold those beliefs. And of course, life is more nuanced than conspiracy theories paint oftentimes. But it's like, you don't know that Steven Spielberg, in all of his, if he is in these Luciferic circles and stuff, which I have no problem believing that he probably is or has been, but that wouldn't maybe wake him up in some sense or give him some new motivations to do something positive. We can't make these huge sweeping assumptions about everybody who's been on the news or is in Hollywood or politics. They're all evil. To me, that is what keeps a lot of this cabal alive on our planet, is that everyone's just outsourcing to them so much power. These people control everything. They're everywhere. And to me, this is what Jesus talked about in the wheat and the tares parable. In a sense, you could say it's analogous, I think, that you're sowing weeds among the wheat in your mind. The wheat is the good stalk you want to grow, the good thoughts. And he actually says an enemy has come and sown weeds among the wheat. And he says, his disciples are like, should we pull them up right now, Lord? He says, no. Wait for both to grow up so you can correctly identify the weeds from the wheat. Because if you try now, they look too similar, you'll pull up the wheat along with it. And I just think that's the perfect way of addressing this topic, right? Of the harsh realities of our world, all the conspiracies, all these new information that's streaming into the zeitgeist at all times, that a lot of these beliefs, although on their face look to be good, like knowing what the cabal's doing at every moment and what conspiracy is happening next, it looks like, yeah, we should be informed of this stuff, guys. But you can see how that could actually be a detrimental thought sown by the enemy to keep your mind focused on the negative, and thus we keep co-creating the negative on our planet. What do you think?
How can I articulate this? If evil exists, the problem is not that evil exists, it's that we spend too much time talking about and studying the evil.
Facts.
Right? That we allow the evil to capture our attention. Because all of the things may be true, and we can study it and be aware of it, and you can spend 500 hours becoming the world's greatest authority on evil.
Yeah.
But what if you spent those 500 hours creating an alternative to it?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And so that's what I hear you saying.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to the nuance of the wheat versus the weeds. But, the question becomes like, what are you creating? How do we use our awareness of these things and then turn the cheek, which I think is just such a beautiful metaphysical instruction, right? Like, and then turn your attention towards that which you are inspired to create as a byproduct of noticing that which you do not prefer, right? That's what it's there for. But it can become very alluring because we have unmetabolized fear in our nervous system. And so we're naturally drawn towards fear. And that's why I think healing and this wholeness that you're talking about and the I becoming single is essential, because as that occurs, you're detoxifying yourself of fear. And so fear can no longer hook you. And now you gain something that is the most powerful skill to have, which is attention sovereignty. Now you can consciously direct your attention towards whatever it is that you want, and you become a sovereign creator. And if we can do that as a people at scale, then we can collectively direct our attention towards a new system. And the byproduct of that is the creating of it. It's not trying to tear down the old one.
Yeah.
And so this is why I think the work that we're talking about here is so important, because not only does it change your life and your relationship with others and your relationship with God and your relationship with yourself, but if you take a page out of Muhammad's book, if we do that at scale as a people, we can create heaven on earth together.
Totally.
But if we just continue to stare at hell and talk about it, and then we can be non-judgmental about staring at hell, because when you really take a look at some of these things that may be true, you go, well, how far back do we want to go to see that these people were abused?
Right.
To see that they've just been living in abuse since the time of Christ, or since the 1000s AD or the 1500s AD. Like, no, but this group has been doing this thing for so long and so many years. And it's like, okay, but didn't that group become this because they were being persecuted too, and learned how to infiltrate and function like the snake as a means of survival? Like, how far back do we want to go to find someone to blame? Or do we just stop playing the blame game and bring our attention to what it is that we want to create?
So true. It's breaking the chain. It's almost like the war in Israel and Gaza. It's like each side goes, well, they attacked us here, well, they attacked us before that, and it goes back and forth. The only way is to forgive. And the only way is to see the light of God, even in your enemies, even with the most evil cabal people who are doing child sacrifices and things like this. Many of these people were ritually abused when they were children. Many of these people have insane traumas that they did not transmute in a positive way. And so they were so broken that they just became part of the system. And for me, that's the one way where I could extend sympathy to someone who's doing things so horrible as abusing children. It can be very difficult to extend sympathy towards those people. But I just try and think about how profoundly broken someone must be, how disconnected from God. I really feel for someone to be so spiritually damaged to do something like that. And like you said, that's a pathway towards healing on a wider scale, because at the end of the day, we are all one.
Yeah, and look, you're more benevolent than I am in your capacity to extend sympathy for some of those things. But I would just say, I would just say, just stop extending judgment. And it's really it's self-serving, because if you're extending judgment, Arnold Schwarzenegger has this great keynote talk. I don't know if you've ever heard it, where he talks about how he hates Plan B. He says, "I hate Plan B." He says, because when you have a fallback plan, every idea that you put into Plan B, you're taking away from Plan A. And he says you need to deposit all of your thoughts and all of your energy into Plan A. And
Partnerships.
But what does that guy know?
And so that's where I look at whether you extend sympathy or you just withdraw judgment, right? Take all of your energy and put it into what we're creating, in order to make the world a better place, and the world becomes a better place. Mm-hmm. But that requires us to become whole, because in the absence of wholeness, we find judgment, resentment, anger, comparison, and the system understands that.
Yes, yeah,
right.
I think what you're saying is shadow work, just to not judge the evildoers, right? Just that act. I think you're working directly on your shadow when you're doing that, because the reason we judge these people, the pedophiles, the child traffickers, the genocidal maniacs, tyrants, we judge them because our mind looks at them and says, I would never do something so evil. I could never. To your point, even if I was brought up in one of these bloodline elite families, it's like, even if they were just brainwashed to believe this, what are you going to do about it? They were taught and indoctrinated this from day one. And so all that really matters is, how are you seeing them, right? And if you decide not to judge them, that is you essentially owning, no, there is potential in me to be like that. If I was born in that family, if roles were reversed, and I was brainwashed from day one that you're an elite, you're better than everybody, you're going to control the world one day, I would probably be doing the same stuff that guy's doing. And that to me is owning your shadow, right? Is those potentialities exist in me.
Yeah, I don't want to pretend like I have the capacity to be consistent with what we're talking about in my actual observation or emotional experience with the world.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's really important, especially if you're viewed as someone who's teaching some things, to be like, yeah, look, do what David says, not what David does. But, I think that's, James, what you and I talked about right before we started recording, where we were talking about recovery and the ability to see a crack addict and really say, but by the grace of God, there go I, right? Mm-hmm. So, I'm grateful for the life that I have and the blessings that I have. And, if it's not for God, I could easily be somewhere else in a different experience, right? And maybe I was at some point in time. Maybe that's what catalyzes, my teacher says, those of us who are stepping up to be helpers and teachers right now did terrible things in our past lives. It's the only way that we actually had the contrast to know that we want to do better. And I was like, that's in alignment with what I believe. And, I did have I was having a conversation with ChatGPT about a week or two ago. And I was having a moment of doubt, looking at what I'm inspired to create in terms of conscious community at scale, and starting to invite many people who are learning to liberate their attention into creating these alternative systems and structures so that we have something to move into, a parallel system that we could call like the new promised land, right? New financial systems, new educational systems, new media structures, right? This is the vision that we have for what we're creating with Whole Human. And I started having doubts because I said to ChatGPT, I said, but man, this control grid, the way the system is, being what it's moving towards, the way it's being locked down, and how many hundreds of years this has been in the process of building, and the extraordinary amount of wealth and power that goes into it. I said, help me think through this in a different way, because I'm having doubts. Mm-hmm. And ChatGPT had a beautiful answer, which was, you're talking about the building of momentum of this control system over hundreds of years, but what you're forgetting is the compounding interest of consciousness over the last 10,000. Wow. And I was like, all right, I hear you on that one.
GPT
right?
dropping bars,
GPT
dude.
dropping bars. And so I was like, yeah, that makes sense. There's such an invisible underground growth that has been taking place for so long.
Yeah.
Of not artificial intelligence, but real intelligence. Mm-hmm. And it takes me back to something that when I read it, I just held on to, which was Genesis 3:15. the proto-evangelium. It's the first of the good news in the Bible. And what I love about it is how in the very beginning of the Bible, God says how it's going to end. And he says, it's as the snake betrays the relationship between God and Adam and Eve. And he says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and hers. And he says, you will strike his heel, he will crush your head.
Yeah.
Right? It's like the statement at the very beginning that, yeah, there will be this battle between good and evil or dark and light. But in the end, good, light wins. Yeah. And then, of course, you get to Revelation and you're like, is this the same author? Like who wrote
the hell are we talking about?
Right. But I also used my friend AI to help me really work through Revelation, because I said, hey, if that's at the beginning, how does it end? And the answer was, in its simplest terms, the system becomes so gluttonous, Babylon, the prostitute, that it implodes on itself. And I was like, oh, wow, you can start to see that right now. And it was the same message, which was, don't worry about that. I'll take care of that.
Yeah.
Go build what I've asked you to build.
Just build it and they will come.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's so simple.
I love that. If we keep focusing on what's not going right, we'll just keep recreating that. So we have to misdirect our attention to what do we want to create. And I think that is where the analogy you've brought up a few times, or not analogy, the scripture of Jesus teaching us to turn the other cheek starts to make a lot of sense, right? You're looking this way, an enemy comes and strikes you on the cheek. And Jesus says, turn to him the other cheek. So it's like you're looking this way, the enemy strikes you, and you look back anyway, right? You don't keep looking the way the enemy struck you to look. You don't keep looking at the negative. You just turn the other cheek. You can see this turning of the head metaphor of don't let the enemy place your attention on what he wants you to place it on. Like you place your attention on where God is calling you to put it. And that's how we move forward. So with the implosion you're talking about of the matrix system of our society, I think it will inevitably and can and only implode if we just keep doing this. We just keep turning the other cheek. I'm not going to look at the fear porn. I'm not going to doom scroll all day. I'm not going to place my attention where the matrix wants me to put it. I'm going to put it on God and put it on building the new thing. And that is the only way forward as I see it. You know, the doomsdaying and the focusing on what's not going well is not going to take us to an enlightened civilization.
Like I said, do as David says. But yes, and I'm grateful for the fact that like we're seeing a way that makes sense, because if you don't have a way, that's where hopelessness sets in, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you just look at what's happening on face value, you know, what's the point?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
To get to double tap on that really quick, if we are evolving out of this old matrix system, it's collapsing and all of that, and we keep doing the turning the cheek, looking forward, looking ahead. Some people would argue, oh, you're just going to let them get away with all this stuff. If you're not looking at it, they get to do whatever they want. So we have to pay attention to what they're doing. And when forgiveness comes into the conversation, we should not judge the enemies, the elites. We should not put them out of our heart. We should forgive them. The natural assumption people make is, oh, so you're saying we just want love and light for you guys, no consequences to your actions, do whatever you want because we love you. And that's a very distorted view of what forgiveness actually is, right? Forgiveness is none of those things. It's not a tacit agreement with evil or anything. It's just saying, I refuse to lower myself to your same frequency. That's it. And so when I say, because I'm a father like you, man, when I say I don't judge the pedophile child traffickers, I definitely don't mean I don't want those guys to get their consequences or the punishment for their crimes. Oh, I absolutely do. Because as we've been talking about this whole podcast, the things that we label as bad end up always being for our highest good. And life/God teaches us through our challenges. So if somebody is living in a state of consciousness that is so freaking warped and distorted, they would abuse a child. I mean, for the love of God, the most evil thing imaginable. That person needs an extremely strong wake-up call. And so it's like, no, I want the elites, anyone who's doing these things, I want everyone to get the appropriate consequences of their actions. And I want it, like it needs to hurt. It needs to be equal to the crime, right? That's how polarity works. And so I think that is the case. I think everybody who does these things, whether in this life or the next, they're going to get their karma, right? We talk about hellish realms all the time on this podcast. It's not a place I would want to go or send anybody, but those realms exist because of choices like that and beings like that who make those choices. So I think, yeah, the big point is just if we keep looking at what they're doing, we sort of have to become like them in a sense if we're always focusing on the negative. So forgiveness is another way of just saying, I don't want to become like that. I don't want to lower myself to that frequency. So I forgive and I surrender the rest to God. God will give all these people the just punishment for their actions, right?
Yeah, I think that last piece is important because I think there's an illusion that I, the individual, is the judge, jury, and executioner. So that last piece is really important. It's like, it's not my job.
Yeah, totally.
My job is to go do what to the extent I have clarity on it, I've been asked to do. It may be someone else's job, even in this life. It could be the International Court of Justice, but like that wasn't my path, so I'm not sitting on that committee, right? That's for those people to figure out. But we allow this to pull so much of our life force and our creative energy, thinking that like it has anything to do with me.
We're going to make a difference.
It just does. It doesn't have anything to do with me. Other things have to do with me, right? So it could be in this life. It could be in the next life. Yeah, there seems to be a karmic wheel, and that's not my job. But when I step into the illusion that it is, that's when it's got me. That's the danger of the serpent, right? That's the danger of the fear, right? Is that it can take away from the potential that I have been given, and the change that I could make in the world, and the things that I could create.
Yeah.
And, from a metaphysical perspective, it's beneficial to understand that all of those things are materializations of unmetabolized trauma that's still held in the nervous system of human beings. So just like in your own individual life, you create situations and circumstances, collectively, we're creating these structures.
Yeah.
And so if you want to, it goes back to that Gandhiism, which is, be the change you want to see in the world. But like, there's a hard science to that, right? It's like the more if we were all responsible for healing ourselves of the fear that we're holding inside of us, the external has to change, right? Now, how would it change? Well, through thoughts and ideas that people have of building new systems, through the implosion of the system and structure itself, right? I'm not saying that it's, some weird, magical, multi-dimensional thing where we're all going to wake up one day and everything's just rematerialized. It plays out in the human experience. But the root cause is what's inside of us. I told this story on one of my episodes, which was, I was having a conversation with my wife and my mother-in-law at dinner, and we had just sold the home that my wife and my mother-in-law owned together. We were talking about buying another home in Florida, and apparently there was some side conversation that the two of them were having about whether my mother-in-law would be on the deed or the title or whatever it is. And I guess my wife had said like, no, you won't be, because here's how we're going to do this. But at that time we were all living together. And so I noticed that there's some tension at dinner. I'm like, hey, what are we talking about? And the long story short was, she said, well, what happens if something happens to Carol, my wife, and you meet another woman and then you kick me out of the house and I have nowhere to live? And I was present to the fact that this was at the same time that we realized that the big private equity firms were buying up all of housing, which was reducing supply and increasing home costs. And I was like, wow, when we've had probably 10,000 coaching conversations in our organization. And if you really look at what financial fears get to, it's like, I won't be able to afford my mortgage. I won't be able to afford my rent. I won't have a roof over my head. I'll be living under a bridge. Well, I mean, that's in all of us.
Yeah.
Because there was a time when that was a real risk. It's not really a real risk for most people now. But if we hold that in our nervous systems and we don't heal it, it will activate thoughts in the field that will find their way to somebody in a boardroom who goes, I have an idea. What if we buy up all of residential housing? That will literally create the reality that we can't afford our own housing. So if we want to change these systems and structures, we got to get rid of the fear that's inside of us.
Yeah.
Going back to the real work that you can do, right?
That's a great way of breaking that down.
You've really inspired me with the certainty of the goodness of the future. And I know we talked about it a bit at the biohacking conference when we met, but I'm just really curious about specifically your vision of a better future. What do these alternate institutions potentially look like? What does a healthier human society look like in your eyes?
What does the new world look like, David?
Small question.
Well, it's a great question, because even in the question, it asserts the need for a different way of thinking. I don't know. And if I did know, it would just be another Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos model, right? So, but from a first principle standpoint, what's required is for an individual to say it's possible, right? It's the willingness to hold the vision and to open up that portal of possibility. Yeah. And so there's this container that I hold of a new system. Other people are holding their own containers for it, and some of those people will be drawn together to collaborate. Yeah. But one is just, I think that's what a visionary does. A visionary holds the possibility for something that most people don't yet view as possible and enrolls them into that possibility. Yeah. So the beautiful thing, and this again goes to the turning the cheek, because it's only by witnessing what we don't like that we get clear on what we do like, or what we don't want that we get clear on what we do want. But we could sit down and spend a weekend, and AI is such a powerful thinking partner now for this exercise, and go, what are all the things we don't like about the current healthcare system, and what's the opposite of that? What are all the things that we currently don't like about the financial system, and what's the opposite of that? What are all the things that we don't like about the internet platforms, and what's the opposite of that? And we would create criteria for a new model, right? So I have some things I'm very excited about building inside the container, but what I'm interested in is creating a container that supports the nourishing and flourishing of all ideas in this new regenerative economy. At a high level, what I see happening is that it'll be governed by something that we might call a democratized regenerative currency, or a way to exchange. Over time, people will transfer their attention from the old system into the new system. That's actually the first thing, transferring their attention and their energy.
Yes, yeah.
They will transfer their transactions and their currency and their capital from the old system to the new system. And as we continue to move more resources from old to new, the new will flourish and the old will start to dissolve. Mm-hmm. You could look at some major KPIs. I think that my vision is that it is think of it as a citizenship 2.0 model. Like, let's look at what we don't like about citizenship, and let's define what we would want out of citizenship.
That's a whole podcast.
And so it is a nation without borders, governed by its own democratized currency model, with businesses inside of it, where capitalism doesn't rule the system, but it's a function of the system. It has its own governance model. So we could look at what we don't like about government to figure out what we do like about government. So what do you have? You have governance. You have what we would call citizenship. You have currency. You have products and services that function according to all the critical needs of our lives. And a constitutional governance that takes into consideration how the model of democracy failed in order to build a better model for that, because clearly it's failed, right? So, I mean, you can think of it as like a Founding Fathers 2.0, except it's not just fathers, it's mothers too. So it's like we have the model. It's called history, and we can take what So, for example, I'm very excited about launching Whole Human. Whole Human is this rhythm for living together, for growing our consciousness together. We're creating some AI tools as consciousness co-pilots. We believe in entrepreneurship. So we've got some entrepreneurial agents that we're building to help people become more successful. We're wanting to move as many people as possible. So that's a membership. And I think that's the early predecessor to the citizenship. So that's a membership. Whole Human Framework is one of our core healing technologies. So we're going to encourage as many people as possible to go through that brainwashing experience. And I look at that as 12-step for everybody.
Yeah.
And then we have the Whole Human Network. And the Whole Human Network is a business opportunity to share and evangelize the transformation of the Whole Human Framework and the Whole Human membership. Because what we see is a perfect storm between people who are wanting to leave their careers and move into a purpose-driven business opportunity, people who will be ejected from the careers that mostly they don't like because of AI, people who are coming out of religion and are looking for spiritual fellowship, people who are in network marketing because it affords them a lot of those benefits. They like the personal growth, they like the fellowship, they like the leadership development, but then they got to fall in love with the barrier of the shake. And so my hypothesis was, well, what if the product was personal growth? So that's the model for whole human. And then I started having a vision for some of these other verticals. So part of my journey is, let's call it health challenges that I've been going through. And so through that process, one of the things I discovered, you guys will love this actually. So I saw some of the best practitioners in the world. I have access to a lot of different people, but to a hammer, everything is a nail. So to the mold practitioner, it's mold. To the metals and mercury person, it's metals and mercury. To the genetics person, it's genetics, and so on and so forth. And none of them are wrong, but none of them are right. And so having been on that journey for almost a decade, I decided to use AI to build a lab protocol, 9 core labs that I think every human being who's interested in longevity should run. And they're not what most of the practitioners are running. Some of them are, some of them aren't. And then I built custom supplementation because it was clear what my problems were. But then I also thought it was interesting when I incorporated my genetics, right? So at the time I ran it through 23andMe. They've since gone bankrupt, and
oh wow,
there are other providers, right, where you can get your genetics done. But what was interesting is that as I was looking at my symptomatology, they mapped to my genetics, not just in terms of genetic expression, but in terms of psychological emotional mapping. So here's what I mean. I tend to have methylation issues and detoxification issues. I also hold iron. So basically I hold on to things, but we have a process for mapping out your limiting beliefs and getting to what we would call the core program. And I shared with you, it's like, there's something wrong with me. But one of my behaviors that's innate within me is I hold on to things. The shadow side of it is worry, right? Because it's a rumination. I hold on to things, right? But it's also, on the light side of it, is like my genius, right? My ability to see complex systems and distill them down into simple frameworks. So what was interesting to me was that I could see in my genetics that I have these holding on to things predispositions. But if I look at it through the lens of Louise Hay's work in Heal Your Life, I could see that psychologically and emotionally I hold on to things. And then I have my body right there in the middle. And so if that's true, that your genetics talk about how your body expresses itself, and your belief systems also explain how your body expresses itself, we should be able to look at your genetics and find your belief systems.
Yeah.
Which we did. So we've created a mapping. It's called the whole human genome, where we can take your genetics and we can tell you everything that you believe, likely what your early age traumas were, how that's translating into your purpose, because it set you up for your purpose, what you're meant to do, what your gifts and talents are. It's highly predictable.
Wow.
Super powerful.
Is this like a blood test or?
It's well, the genetics is a saliva test.
Okay.
So you can use any provider. At some point, we'll become our own provider for running these tests, then running the labs, creating custom and supplementation, and providing whole human protocols that address not only what's happening on the physical side, but the psychological, emotional side. So I'm very excited to create that within the system.
Yeah, so
that's
cool,
one of my
man.
companies. But I imagine there will be thousands of companies focused on health within this new economic model, right? Yeah. So some of the vision that we have, and as I'm holding the vision, people are showing up to build out parts of it, because this is not a one person builds it all out, again, type of, tech oligarch model. It has to be built from the bottom up, so that it becomes sustainable and regenerative. But that's part of the vision.
Oh, amazing.
So awesome. And I'm happy you brought up the importance of health and your work towards understanding and improving human health, because we study the Essenes in depth in the early Christians. And one of the things that's been wiped from history and what we believe made them such remarkable them making such a huge spiritual impact in the world, that they really prioritized health, and they had systems around health and regimens and things. And we believe, when the body's healthy, the Holy Spirit can really shine through, and when there's disease, it can blur the line. So I really agree with you in terms of the goodness of the future is largely dependent on humanity gaining a deeper understanding of our own health and instituting different frameworks for helping us achieve that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good word to use, because we're talking about physical health, mental health, emotional health, financial health, familial health. Yeah. We're really talking about what is wholeness. It to be healthy? Yeah, wholeness. And you just gave me a great idea, because I'd love to see what you guys believe in terms of protocols and rhythms for healthy living. because that would be an amazing thing to share with the whole human community.
Nice.
So I just found myself 2 faculty members. So we've killed a lot of birds with one stone. It's a terrible thing to
We'll
say.
talk about it at dinner.
Yeah.
After the pod.
Yeah.
For sure.
Amazing.
We think it's a huge neglected part of the spiritual path is physical health and optimization. As you know, it just makes all the difference in how much you can connect with yourself, with the divine. It's just so difficult to feel connected when you're sleep deprived and obese and heart disease and whatever else.
Going back to our quitting coffee conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back where it all started. Well, David, man, what an epic conversation this has been. Thank you again for joining us today and adding all your wisdom.
Thank you guys. Really enjoyed it. This has been fantastic. This is the first time I've been able to just drop in unscripted and have this amount of time to cover this much ground. It's been really, really fun. Thank you both.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, it's so much fun. And we're very grateful. You know, this message will resonate so much with our audience. And we've had so many people write in that they love you already.
Yeah. A lot of crossover for sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, thank you for the work you're doing, man. Everything you laid out, it's so essential for humanity right now. So let our audience know, where can they connect with you more and find out what you're doing?
Yeah, great. So a couple of things. So I do have a book. It's called A Changed Mind. It's on Amazon. If people want to go deeper into this conversation, that's a great place to start. I have the podcast where we've got a pretty significant YouTube following, same name, A Changed Mind, come out with 2 episodes a week. And then we put something really cool together for your community. It's at wholehuman.com/Jesus. So we gave Jesus a shout out there, wholehuman.com/Jesus. It is an assessment that is going to help your listeners identify their top 2 or 3 limiting beliefs. It's powered by the David technology that we're creating with AI right now. So it utilizes all of our frameworks.
Nice.
And then once those limiting beliefs are identified, it's going to walk them through our decision matrix, which is one of the most powerful tools we have for transforming them.
Epic.
Sounds epic, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys can find all those links David just mentioned in the show notes below and get more involved with David's amazing work. So again, David, thank you for joining us today, brother. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure was mine. Thank you both.
Yeah, and James, as always, brother, thanks for your wisdom in this conversation today. And thank you all for tuning in to this episode of the Jesus Way podcast. As always, the whole point of why we do all of this is to enable and empower you to get out into your world and love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself, because that's the Jesus way. And we'll see you back here on the next episode of the Jesus Way podcast. Peace and love.